the Rockefeller Foundation. What I love about presenting to you is I think I was at one of the first early days agricultural working group meetings at the ABS when it just got started, and so it's just lovely to see that there's been this continuation. Today I want to talk about something that was really inspired by some prayer and meditation in the Shrine of the Bab, and I want to welcome two people who will be also part of this presentation. Paul Hanley, who you all know, and Renee Shah Mohamedlou, who is from the University of Guelph. And I'll introduce them at an appropriate point in time, but I'm really glad they could join us. So let me just jump right in. This is about this Food System Vision Prize that the Rockefeller Foundation has been doing in the last year. And it really started off, I had in 2018, my daughter was serving in Haifa. And so we took advantage of having a child in Haifa. And I went to visit, we did a 9-day visit. And I spent a lot of time in the Shrine of the Bab praying and meditating. And I actually took a little notebook in there, and I just said, now what could I do with this incredible role at the Rockefeller Foundation? As many of you may know, the Rockefeller Foundation is the oldest functioning foundation in the United States. It really started philanthropy in the US. And for much of its life, it was the largest foundation. That is no longer the case. But it has really been investing in food and agriculture for almost the last 100 years, was instrumental in creating the Soil Conservation Service, actually founded and funded the first schools of nutrition across the United States. But it's probably best known for a lot of the work around the Green Revolution, for all of its, and I'm happy to talk about that, both the positive and the negatives of that initiative. So I was like, what can I do to be of service to the world with this position? And I was reading this quote, the couple of quotes that I wanted to share with you, which is, there's a quote in the Bible that says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." And then this quote by Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, where he says, "We cherish the hope that through the loving kindness of the all-wise, the all-knowing, the obscuring dust may be dispelled and the power of perception enhanced, that the people may discover the purpose for which they have been called into being. In this day, whatsoever serveth to reduce blindness and to increase vision is worthy of consideration. This vision acteth as the agent and guide for true knowledge. Indeed, in the estimation of men of wisdom, keenness of understanding is due to keenness of vision. The people of Baha must under all circumstances observe that which is meet, exceedingly exhort the people accordingly." So that really struck me as this vision acteth as the agent. Like, without vision, we can't move forward. There's always two creations, the first in your mind and then in reality. And then this final passage where the quote is, "I pray that your vision of the vast opportunities that are yours may never be dimmed, that your efforts to realize that vision may never slacken, and that the gracious aid of Baha'u'llah may never be withheld from you all through your sacred mission in this world." And it made me think about, the Baha'i vision of the future is quite unique from almost any other spiritual tradition, because we're so clear that we are going to create world peace. We're going to have this world system. It's an incredibly powerful vision. Many other spiritual traditions, if you take the Islamic or Christian or Judaic, everybody's kind of waiting for the time of the end, right? The world is going to end. In Hinduism, Buddhism, it's just this endless cycle of pain and suffering. we have this vision of creating a world that is actually heaven on earth, that where there is justice and peace. And so I was like, well, how do you apply that to agriculture, and what do we do? And so that's how this all got started. The other thing that one of the thoughts that came to me in the shrine was this exercise we did when I was at the Amidyar Network, which is another philanthropy set up by the founder of eBay. And we did a study of all the movies and books about the future. And 98% of them are dystopian. They're very dark. They're Hunger Games, Mad Max, Minority Report, Handmaid's Tale. And you go, we're so good at describing the future we don't want. And it's really dark. And we're actually terrible at describing, as a society, describing the world we actually want. We spend amazing amounts of time and resources and talent describing dystopian futures. Imagine if we actually spent all that time and effort describing the world we actually want. And so it was out of that came this idea of, well, can we, and there's a lot of good reason why there's so much dystopian. Like, I think we all have, we know we're facing climate change, all the malnutrition that's right now, especially due to COVID, is increasing. The obesity epidemic, the waste of food, the inequality that COVID has exacerbated or really revealed. It's always been there. The long-term, soil degradation. There's a lot of reasons to be dystopian, but what if we actually made all the right decisions? What would that actually look like? And we really started talking about, like, how do we shift from the overwhelming dystopian perspective that we're just trying to survive, people are talking about incremental solutions, to actually creating something that's really optimistic, thriving, transformative. And when we proposed a food system vision prize, I went out and we looked around, and turns out no one has actually done a prize for a vision. We have a lot of prizes for innovations, specific technological fixes, but in terms of an overall vision of the future, turned out we couldn't find one. And it's interesting because, I was talking to people and I was like, well, what is a vision, and how would you measure it, and how would you evaluate it? And there's a lot of skepticism, but I knew, because I had this meditation in the Shrine of the Bob, there was something to this. So I kept pushing, and we identified an incredible firm called IDEO and Second Muse to help us develop this. And we worked on designing what this Vision Prize could be for about 9 months. And we were going to launch in September of 2019. And then the lawyers got involved, and it turns out if you're doing a prize, it has implications for lottery law and all kinds of, and the lawyers came back to us and said, you can't launch in September. You have to launch October 29th. And I was kind of bummed that we have to wait another month. We have to go through all these legal hurdles. And then October 28th, I woke up and I realized, oh my God, October 29th is the birth of the Bob. So the idea I had in the Shrine of the Bob was getting launched on the birth of the Bob, and it had nothing to do with me. I wanted to launch a month earlier, so I knew this was going to be something special, and so we launched it. And the original projections was, well, we're going to get maybe 300 applications or 400 applications. We got 1,300. It blew away every other record. Open IDEO and Second Muse have done these innovation awards. We doubled what they'd ever done in the hundreds of these things that they'd done. So it hit upon people are craving hope and craving vision. And I think one of the things that was interesting and successful is we had to actually create a whole prize toolkit. How do you actually create a vision? What does that mean? What are the questions? And this whole co-creation process was really incredible. And if you get a chance, go through this toolkit, because I think it's quite inspiring. And we had to ask questions like, what is this balance between efficiency and quality? And because you actually still have to feed 9 billion people, so you have to be pretty efficient. But we have to also do it in a way that has quality. And how do we do that? How do you balance the need to improve farmer livelihoods with affordable food? How do you revitalize rural food systems? Or do you focus on building urban ones? What's the role of animal agriculture? These are all fundamental questions that every food system has to ask. And what is interesting is that, with 1,300 people, groups submitting, you really saw the incredible diversity. There is no one solution. There are many, many solutions, and they have to be tailored as a result of a consultative process within each of those places. And, very along the lines of the Baha'i perspective on development, which is, at the end of the day, development is about improving people's capacity to make their own decisions and not have decisions made dependent. And each food system has to have a consultative process that figures out what makes sense for them. One of the first things we did, it turns out that, as we prototyped this, the most important conversation to have was actually around values and principles. And, we started this out with, what are our core beliefs? And these are really also informed by a lot of Baha'i principles that, this is about interconnectedness. This is about community building. It's about honoring traditions, but also moving forward. It's about, promoting health and wellness of ourselves, of the environment. And so we found that if people started talking about these things, about values and about principles, it set the foundation to resolve really difficult things. And for some reason, when you're talking about the future, you can get very diverse people together in the same room, people who don't agree with what to do right now, but they can actually agree on what to do in the future, which I think is a really powerful way to get unity and diversity. So as a mechanism. And so we had this 1,300, and lo and behold, I saw a few Baha'is actually putting together and their visions, or leading teams, or being part of teams. And 3 of them made it into the semifinalist round, which was super exciting for me. So there was one from Lima, Peru, Soroush Parsa. Unfortunately, he was going to be with us, but he couldn't make it. But he sent me a presentation. And Renee, who's on the call, and Paul. And Paul and Soroush actually made it in the final top 10. We had 100 judges doing this, and so I did not tip the scale, just to let everybody know that I was not the one who selected. There's 100 leading world experts on food and agriculture helped us select the top, the 76 and the top 10. And I thought it would be really wonderful. I have actually not even had this conversation with Paul, so this will be the first time I'm having it. Paul and Renee, what was your process, and how did you apply Baha'i principles? And so I wanted to just give Paul and Renee an opportunity for just a 5-minute kind of sharing of their process and how how they experienced that. So maybe if I can just allow Paul to speak a bit, and then Renee, and then I'll share a little bit about what Soroush did. So Paul, do you mind jumping in?
Not at all. Thanks a lot, Roy. And so this is a kind of a little summary of our project. I don't know if I can even say it. I'm working on it. Huescas Tasawin Wakotawin. So this is a project that's based in Treaty 4 territory, which runs across Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba, the southern parts. So I ran into Roy actually at the ABS conference, I guess it was just last year, and Roy said, oh, we're having this vision process you should think about applying. So I thought, okay, well, let's give this a try. And I think I've been trying to work on a vision for prairie agriculture since the 1970s. And I'm actually not an expert at all. I'm not an agricultural expert, and I'm not a farmer, but I'm a writer, and I've been writing about this topic for a long time. And I've always kind of tried to combine the Baha'i vision and then the research and study I was doing on ecological alternatives in agriculture. And so this kind of gave me an opportunity after, 45 years of thinking about these themes and to write up a proposal. And so I kind of looked at our situation here in the prairies and started thinking about what the problems were and kind of related it back to colonialism. So our whole system was set up our agri-food system was set up in the 1800s, the late 1800s, through the Dominion Land Survey, where the colonial powers moved in and divided the entire region into squares. And kind of I had this image of flying over Saskatchewan and seeing everything divided into squares, this kind of an efficient industrial model, this productivist model that was imposed on the prairies, not only on the prairie ecosystem, but on the people that lived here as if they didn't exist, the Indigenous people. So I thought the idea was to, how could we create a future where there was justice, there was equality, there was sustainability all combined. And so we definitely had to address this issue of colonialism. And so I think, really all the Baha'i principles really applied very well. And Baha'u'llah talked about the object of every revelation being to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind that would infect both this inner life and outer life. So we looked at how could we do this, and one of the areas there's 6 areas that were given that we should address in the vision. One of them was culture. So definitely we wanted to look at what are elements of Indigenous culture. So this idea of wakotuin is an idea of how everything is related. Sometimes it's used for your relations, your family, your cousins, but also the idea that everything in the system is related. And the vision called for system thinking, and the Indigenous people really had that. And then this idea of huescastasawin, which is about making things right. So in Canada right now, we're talking about this idea of reconciliation. But this is a stronger concept about everybody working together to make things right, setting things right. So that was part of this, and it allowed us to actually introduce the whole idea of spirituality and even prayer and ceremony and so on as part of a cultural shift. And then if you look at this diagram for this part of the vision, you'll see that it also made sense to introduce sort of a process of cultural transformation. Because I think the way our system is now, our cultural system, we are training people in a conventional agriculture, but a whole approach to food and ecosystems through our educational system and all aspects of Neil Watley is here, and Neil worked with me very closely on this. And we also talked to about 30 different people who have expertise in these in agriculture and culture and food, quite a few Indigenous people, and got a lot of input from them. And so we're trying to continue that process as we move forward with the vision. How's that, Roy? Is that kind of give you
that's great. Yeah. Well, it gives you a little taste, and you can always go in, by the way, into the foodsystemissionprize.org And there's the whole vision. Now, this is just one dimension. There were 6 dimensions: technology, environment, health, etc. And you had this level of detail thinking through this. So it's really quite impressive. I wanted to just, the next one is the Lima 2035. This is Surush Parsa. Something came up just a few hours ago that he had to take care. But I wanted to just share a little bit about his vision, which I found really exciting. Can everybody see the Lima 2035? Yeah. Okay. So he noticed, he works for the International Potato Center. It's one of the 15 international research organizations that work on international agricultural research. This one obviously focused on the potato because potatoes come from Peru. And he knows that, right now Lima is this sea of sand, no running water, no wells, nothing green. But that was, and 4 million people live in this desert, and 2 million of them are lacking this running water. There's 65% of adults are overweight or obese. I mean, it's a really acute, reading the reality of that city is sobering. But he said, and then he went back in history, and they found these descriptions of Lima, this verdant landscape of farmland, fruit orchard, lush hills, right? That Lima in 1535 was actually an amazing place. So this idea of, in order to move forward, we need to build on the past, and instead of scale, often people talk about scaling agriculture. He talked about agriculture scaling. He took the passage where Abdu'l-Baha talks about everyone being a producer, and started working with that idea with about 20 different groups in Lima. He brought them all together and had these amazing sessions. And key was this idea of, how do you create water and flow in the driest desert? And there's this whole technology around capturing ocean water and with these nets. He started talking about how to create these rooftop, changing the slums into rooftop gardens, a really distributed system, creating food hubs, which were actually originally part of the of Lima of the past, and then connecting. So there was a really beautiful green Lima with urban agriculture, minor livestock. It's just a beautiful, a different view instead of this dry landscape, this verdant landscape, and it's really inspired an incredible response from the population. And in fact, this has now become, it was the only international agricultural research center to have won a prize. All these international ag research centers are now paying attention to this and supporting it. So it's pretty exciting. So that's the Lima one. Then let me go back to. I want to turn this over to Renee, who was one of the semifinalists. And hold on, did I go back? Okay. And he led an incredible oh, sorry. I think I might have not put in your. Did I put in your? Yes. This is yours, right?
That is.
Did I miss out one of your?
That's okay. I will. I'll work with it.
Okay, great. Renee, if you could talk for
a
little bit.
Thank you, Roy, and Alapa, everyone. This was an incredible experience that was led by the Rockefeller Foundation, Open IDEO, and Second Muse for the world to think of a creative and transformative vision for producing nutritious food. There were several quotations that had inspired me to apply when I heard about this. One of them, and I don't remember it word for word, but I'm sure you're all familiar, it comes from Shoghi Effendi when he talks about how man is organic with the world. and that reciprocal relationship between the human being and the environment are intimately linked with one another. And we also know from the House of Justice, they wrote an incredible message on March 2nd, 2013 to the Cradle of the Faith, where they say, the deepening environmental crisis driven by a system that condones the pillage of natural resources to satisfy an insatiable thirst for more suggests how entirely inadequate is the present conception of humanity's relationship with nature. So when the Food Vision Prize opportunity was presented to me, I didn't need to look very far, because in the Laurentian Great Lakes system, which Southern Ontario's in our region, we pride over the Great Lakes, having such a large aquatic freshwater system. That system, which is the core of my PhD research, I didn't need to look very far, because there's constantly these reoccurrences of toxic algal blooms, which is the core of my thesis right now. And those algal blooms are the epitome of this deepening environmental crisis that the House of Justice writes about. And it was from these blooms, actually, that my collaborators and I and the world really have known for decades about the intimate connection between the formation and sustenance of these blooms and the inputs of nutrients from agriculture. And it was from here that our vision for Southern Ontario was born. And our vision for the region was clear among our collaborators to transform our region into one that has adopted regenerative agricultural practices. However, the behemoth in Southern Ontario and the West has been, and it continues to be, this prevailing mentality of carrying on life with the business as usual model. And we knew, as the House of Justice describes in another message, that justice demands universal participation. So this guiding principle for us meant that our vision for 2050 must rebuild a regional food system with strong circular food economies and food hubs that included small-scale and large-scale agriculture. And in our interactions as we were going through this, there tended to be extremes. Either it had to be all small-scale or it had to only be large-scale. And we realized that in order to truly build a just system, we have to envision both as being actors in the system. And in forming the team, actually, another guiding principle, just as the House of Justice describes a nucleus of friends who are working together in a neighborhood to strengthen the activities of the faith, at the center of our vision was a growing nucleus of groups who were committed to collaborate together to promote prosperity in the region. And as you can see in that diagram, that these stakeholders included local and regional governments, NGOs, research institutions, Indigenous rights holders, and farmers. And really we recognize that in order to truly develop this regenerative and nourishing food system for 2050 in our region, and this is another core principle of the faith, we need to go beyond the individual and take a community-centric approach for paving the path for the future, and that unity of vision requires unity in action. And it was very inspiring going through this process and seeing all these organizations who were so like-minded. It honestly, in some ways, it felt like you were with a group of people who were all inspired by the teachings of the faith, unknowingly or knowingly.
Fantastic, thank you. So one of the things Renee did so well is you know, it's this kind of creating the system map that really kind of showed how everything connected in a beautiful way. And you know, we know that at the core of the concept, you know, the oneness of humanity, it's the one, we are all interconnected, and being able to describe that and how, you know, these are not one-shot solutions. You have to be addressing these multiple dimensions in a truly participatory way, right? I mean, it's interesting. So many of these visions of the future don't even talk to farmers, right? And you know, it was critical that people are actually doing the work, had wisdom and insights that could be contributing. Let me go on. I want to just point out two other ones that were, I think, really amazing. I actually went to India for a Baha'i event, and at this event met the CEO of the Nandi Foundation, which is a major Foundation working with school feeding and agriculture. And he got so excited by this. He's not a Baha'i, but incredibly enamored by the vision of Baha'u'llah. He got his organization to put together this what they call Aruconomics, which is working with tribal groups in Andhra Pradesh, a state in India, and with looking at peri-urban agriculture around New Delhi. And the way he developed that was just absolutely brilliant. So if you want to treat yourself, go into the Aruconomics vision, and it's another part of the world. You see a very different way of thinking, but the ultimate principles are very similar. The other vision I wanted to just point out is the Dutch, rerouting the Dutch food system. And this was submitted by Wageningen University, which is probably the premier, besides Guelph, of course, Renee. Wageningen is one of the premier agricultural universities in the world. And their vision was really focused on this circular economy and using the latest technology to make that happen. So, the power of technology, if it's directed towards achieving this goal, is really incredible. One of the things that, when we looked across all the so many of these visions, at the core was you have, out of the 1300, you have, there are some visions that are like, I don't want anything to do with modern technology. I want to go back to the past. And the reality is there was never a great past. There is elements of the past, but a lot of the romantic ideal of that people have in their mind about what farming was is not very romantic to the people who actually had to do it. And then the other extreme is you had, we're just going to get rid of all the people and have all the robots do everything. And you actually, there was a couple of visions where actually there was no people in the agricultural system at all. And it was a complete rejection of everything. But then the vast majority were really about, how do you have both, have the best technology, but also founded in values and principles, because at the end of the day, this is about creating, foundations for human happiness and the betterment of humanity. And it was interesting that almost every vision talks about ecology and agroecology and how do you understand that, but not, in a lot of conventional agriculture has often kind of rejected agroecological thinking because they say that's anti-technology, and wasn't the case at all. People want to be able to determine what the technology is used for. What's the end of the technology? And we want the most advanced agriculture, robotics, artificial intelligence, but it's supposed to help with the ultimate end and not be an end in itself, which is too often the case with current agricultural technology. It's technology for technology's sake, without thinking what it would be, what the implications would be for the future. I mean, with climate change, soil degradation, all of it, we need the best technology in the world to address those issues. But we need it in a way that enhances human happiness and human community. For example, one of the things that I'm really concerned about right now is that artificial intelligence and automation is, you can't put those back. You cannot stop that, but maybe you can direct it in a way that's enhancing community. So one example is, instead of right now, all the funding is going to very large scale artificial intelligence automation. What about creating mini robots so that small and medium-sized farmers can have address their labor shortages? Because if anybody who's run a small farm knows, labor is a really big issue. How can we enhance small and medium-sized enterprises, and not just the large ones, which we need. We need the large farms too for some things. So those are the kinds of really interesting conversations that we were part of. So first of all, I think, to end, and then I'm going to open it up to questions, and please put things in chat. But, this idea of focusing on what we want and what we hope for, and not just in what we're afraid of, and not just the dystopian, because you can't create energy and creativity and unleash that if you're only focused on doomsday, which, by the way, is so easy to do right now. I mean, 2020 has been a hell of a year with all the racial justice. It's interesting, people started developing these visions before COVID hit, before the racial justice issues, etc. But all of them had those kind of embedded, and really were able to, I think in many cases, enhance, like, how do you create a COVID-reliant food system? How do you create a food system that really addresses the racial inequality that's been built into current agricultural structures? I mean, the plantation system was a system that was a foundational exploitative system in the United States. And how do we shift away from that? So that was very interesting. How do we create a different vision? The second is, then how do you link all of these people up so that we can support each other? It is not easy maintaining a vision of a better world. And we need to inspire each other, connect, and we're hoping that these will contribute to a much broader conversation. So one of the things we didn't even expect and had not planned for was that the United Nations just announced a few months ago, earlier this year, that they were going to have a food system summit. It's the first time the United Nations has ever had that, which is to really bring people together to talk about what we need, how do we need to change the food system. Well, they've come to us and say, oh my God, of all the people out there, you actually have visions of the future. Everybody's talking about problems. You're actually talking about solutions. Can we potentially highlight your visions for the Food System Summit? And we're in active conversation now with the Secretariat of the UN to potentially highlight this, and then also enhance some of the lessons we learned from creating these food systems is to create a network of people contributing to the UN Food System Summit, so that it's not just a country process, but really civil society is engaged. And so this has led this whole United Nations another area of activity, which I think could be very exciting. We also want to unleash innovation. If you can't imagine what you want and you don't have a goal, you're going to be innovating in the wrong direction or not in a relevant way. And so we need massive amounts of innovation to reduce waste, to improve efficiency, to reduce environmental damage, etc. And then finally, we want to invest. You need to spur investment in each of these places. This is going to take some significant amount of financial capital. So those were some of the 4 goals we had, and I know I have 15 minutes left. So let me stop there, and I am open to ideas, questions. Feel free to put stuff in the chat. Let me pull up and see what you've got.